Welcome back to Midlands Rugby Podcast. Phil, how you doing?
I'm very well, mate. Yeah, good to be back.
Good. It still feels weird not introducing it as PASPod. I have to really think about what I'm saying.
Yeah, I wondered where you were going with the opening then, per se.
Yeah. No, I could do the whole what I scripted of make sure you leave a 5-star review. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and whatever. But it's 10 past 8 on a Friday, and to be honest, I don't care if no one listens today. If I'm honest, it's been a long week. You've just done bedtime. How was that?
Yeah, pretty good. Half an hour to get to and sleep. That's not too shabby.
Not too bad. Not too bad. So we'll crack straight into it. As we are the Midlands Rugby Podcast, we will look at kind of the league that we're playing in the Northeast, but we'll have a look at the Midlands results as well. But Phil, what's been cracking off in Northeast One regional north of York league going?
Yeah, we've had a bit of a funny start. Three good games on the team. Um, Two close games against Driffield and Ilkley, where we came out on the wrong side. On another day, it could have been different. And then, yeah, we got a win on Saturday against Alnwick,
Mm.
which was a good result for us. And then we're off to sunny Sandal tomorrow.
Shaky wakey. What a dream.
Yeah, and so we'll see how that goes. But um, it's not a dissimilar brand of rugby. I think what we've all taken on board is everyone's a bit bigger up in the north. And no, it's been all right so far. Just kind of interesting, sort of feel people out. Obviously, the club pavers themselves. We go through a bit of a transition this year, so a lot of new faces in coming through from the academy and stuff, which is a positive.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So that's our league, the league that we're in the Northeast. But the Midlands regional, where we used to be, where ideally we would like to have remained, um,
Yes,
looks like it's been a bit of an interesting start to the season. Then a lot of points flying around for
yeah.
again.
So it's another one which has been sort of really sort of shooken up. So
Chicken.
um, shooken up. Tyson and Derby both 4 from 4. It's a great start for Derby, having just come up into the league.
Mm.
Dudley Kings Winford doing really well. Burton up there. We played Burton towards the end of last year. They were a good team. Um, and then yeah, sort of Oundle got themselves a win. Broad Street got themselves one win. Bridge North doing all right. So yeah, it looks like a good league, that one. Pretty even all right. Uh, with regional North Midlands, which I think is kind of more sort of Northeast Midlands.
Yeah.
Um, and Long Eaton have bounced straight to the top of that league. So fair play to them. We played them in pre-season and they look relatively solid.
Mm.
So yeah, I think shaping up in the Midlands all right. I think some teams will be doing a bit more travelling than they used to, even though this whole league system was meant to reduce travel. In that league, for example, sort of Moseley Oak and Sutton Coldfield coming across from essentially Birmingham. I think Silly Ends might be from that way as well. That's a lot of trouble for them boys.
A lot of travel.
But yeah, it's kind of coming to fruition. I've really enjoyed it. Playing some new teams is always a bit quite nice. Yeah, it's shaping up. But yeah, you don't normally really see sort of probably 2 more games, so 6 games in, and you'll see who the big wigs are in each league when it's
Yeah,
all filtered
definitely.
down a bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even playing in the twos league, we're playing a lot of first team, well, because they've only got one team at the club. But it looks like I think we've been a little bit shocked by some of the brands of rugby being played in the twos. Because actually, I think we maybe thought that some of these teams were not below us, but we thought we could run them off the park. And actually, we've had some tight games, and it looks like in some of the lower leagues in the Midlands, apart from Nottingham Moderns putting 53 on East Retford, last week. Everything seemed to be really kind of and because Stephen put a 75 on Silby, but we'll graze over that. But all the teams local that everyone will remember from Colts games and what have you, will be relatively tight games. So hopefully it looks like we're starting to get a bit of a groove in Midlands again for the rugby stance.
Yeah, I think the shape of the leagues might actually help in terms of just getting games played. I think there was getting to a point where we were, especially sort of second and third team rugby, we were really struggling. So having second teams in the league might improve that. Who have you got tomorrow, Tom?
We've got North Hycombe, who I learned are in Lincolnshire today.
Yeah.
And I Googled, because for those who follow Pavers, I do the social media, and you would have seen today on Instagram, I put Socks and Sandals as the song for the first team lineup, which I found really, really funny. I'm not sure anyone else did, but I couldn't find anything to do with North Hycombe, which was famous. So I couldn't make any reference to North Hycombe there, but it should be a relatively good game, I would have thought. I think they've had some big wins and some big losses, so hopefully we'll be able to report back next week about a team again that I've never played, North Wycombe. I think that's one of the things coming into joining an RFU league and having to start at the lower levels. You start to see teams that you know are around but you've never actually been to, and you go and meet people. And it's nice to go to clubs where actually there's only one team, because back when we were playing friendlies and in the Pennants leagues against second and third teams, they weren't drilled. Whereas the first teams, the reason we're probably put back a bit is because we're going to places like Mead and Vale, where there's one team, but they're drilled because they train every week.
Yeah.
So as long as its structure changes a game massively, doesn't it? So if a team's putting structure in, and if they can find their feet, it's actually quite hard to overcome that, I think.
Yeah, I think we've got enough lads in our second team, especially that are getting the coaching and the turning up to training weekly. So that's positive for us. Let's start.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, one of the things we really want to talk about today was the Midlands and its rugby, and sadly it's professional rugby that might not be no longer.
Yeah.
So obviously everyone knows what's going on at Worcester, or not everyone knows or understands, but Worcester have gone into administration, and Wasps sound like they're not too far behind, which is worrying. Not only because the professional game in the area is struggling enough, but also there's lots of people whose jobs and lives dependent on those two clubs. So Tom tasked me with doing some accounting work because he thinks that's all I can do, and it doesn't make for great reading. And I wouldn't be surprised if most rugby clubs look like it. Worcester haven't made a profit in the last 8 years, and have been nowhere near making a profit in the last 8 years. Yeah. Now the top codes might make a bit because they'll own the ground and they'll be able to hike up all the cash and stuff, but it kind of shows you that the way rugby clubs are run isn't feasible unless you've got a huge financial backing, which sadly Worcester and Wasps don't necessarily have. No,
and I think I was trying to say earlier before the Wi-Fi went, but I think it looks like, from what I can tell, Worcester Warriors is down to mismanagement, and I think Wasps is probably a little bit more to do with COVID, from what I can tell. I don't know what's gone down at Worcester Warriors. They're in real bad shape. I know that, from what I can tell, players thought they could leave, but it doesn't look like they can now leave until they put another company into administration. Wasps look like I think Wasps have filed for administration, but I don't think anything's actually come off the back of that yet. So yeah, it's a bit of a shit time for professional rugby. I mean,
yeah, it's quite a confusing one with the players' contracts as well. So, Worcester Rugby Club is essentially known as WRFC Trading Limited. And they've got a subsidiary called WRFC Players Limited. So all the players are contracted to Players Limited, right? Which isn't the one that is under administration. It's the Trading Limited that's under administration. So as soon as your company goes into administration, or the company you're contracted to goes into administration, you are technically or almost technically free of your contract. There's like a 14-day waiting period normally.
Yeah.
What the issue is at Worcester is that a lot of the players thought as soon as they went to administration, they'd be free.
Yeah.
Well, actually, because they're part of Players Limited and not Trading Limited, that's not the case. However, an article that came out a couple of hours ago from The Guardian has basically said that they've sort of enforced this 14-day thing now for the players.
Right. Okay.
But if it all falls over before, then they'll be free of the contracts anyway.
Yeah.
But then that's fine for the players because, some of those players or the majority of those players might be fortunate to go off and find another club, whether that's in the UK or France or, might decide to try their hand in Japan or the USA. There's hundreds and having played at that club as an away team, the amount of people at Worcester is phenomenal.
Oh yeah, ridiculous.
Those who haven't been to the ground, it's a massive function room basically. They make all their money from the function rooms, all the stuff that goes on in the background. And I think something that struck me quite early on, a couple of weeks ago, I read it. It cost them 120 grand to put a game on.
Yeah, which is just an enormous amount of money.
Yeah, I think rugby crowds aren't going to generate you 120 grand per game to recoup that.
And what's interesting is, I think when you get the TV rights in, I think if you look at, and I was thinking this today because Bristol again are on TV tonight, and Sarries and Leicester again on TV tomorrow. And it's the same teams you see. You very rarely see Worcester on BT Sport, and it's the teams that have got, although there is a salary cap, it's the teams that are meeting their salary cap, if not just below, who are the ones that are always on TV, because that's where the superstars is. And it's Worcester's got one or two very, very good rugby players, but they're not the team that people who don't really follow club rugby want to watch. They want to watch the Bristols, the Leicesters, the Sarries, the Sales, because that's the teams they know that have been in and around the top of the league, the Exeters, because that's where the England players are playing. That's the only reason people watch club rugby if they've actually not got much of an interest. So I thought that was a really interesting thing when I worked out how much it, well, didn't work out, but I read how much it costs to put a game on.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the money the guys get or the clubs get from Premiership Rugby. But looking on the RFU's statement from 2021, club funding in men's and women's Premiership and men's Championship overall has gone from 33 million in 2020 to 12.2 million in 21.
Yeah.
So it's gone down by a third. So the clubs will be receiving a third. Hopefully the women's game is receiving more than they were previously, but I doubt that. The Championship we know received bugger all.
Yeah.
So you might find that each club in the Premiership, of which I think is there 13 this year? 13,
yeah.
Yeah. You might find that they might get sort of 700 grand each.
Yeah.
From the RFU, which is nothing.
It won't cover wages. It doesn't cover the wages of marquee players.
Right. 700 grand will barely. What's Van der Merwe on? Like 300 grand, I reckon? 250?
Yeah, definitely.
He's played 4 games.
Yeah, I know.
Like, I was looking through the team sheet. I was going, I didn't realise he was there. Oh, he's played 8 games in 2 years.
Well, I do think that's part of the problem is we have these marquee players that don't count in the salary cap. I use Bristol as an example because I obviously follow him very closely. But you've got Semi Radradra, you've got Charles Pietro. I think I've seen Semi play 4 games in about 2 or 3 years, and that's for about 45 minutes until he gets injured. Pietro is often not around. Now we've got Genji and Sinclair. They're not off screen. So teams are paying big bucks for players that actually they're only getting a small handful of games out of. Yeah. And it just doesn't make it. It just feels like rugby actually, as much as it's trying to put itself out there as we want to build the grassroots stuff. We want to build the women's game up. It's not actually looking after the brand it's got, let alone trying to start off a new one. And I'm not sure where that blame lies. I'd like to blame the RFU because that's what we like to do. But I also think there's a lot of CEOs and owners of clubs who actually have no care in the world about rugby. They just see them as cash cows because the Mario Togis, the Ellis Genges, the Van der Merwes, all these big names in rugby are there. So they think that's how they're going to make their cash.
Yeah, and I think and I've said this before on the podcast. 45-man squad. That is a huge salary bill for a sport that just doesn't get the interest.
No,
not the interest in rugby in this country for a 45-man squad to be supportable.
Love him or hate him, James Haskell often puts it quite well, and he often says, "Rugby is everything. If you are in rugby, outside of rugby, no one cares at all what goes in." Yeah. Behind the rugby club. For us, we live and breathe. We don't live and breathe it, but we're at our club 3 times a week. We do this. We have a look at stuff going on in the world of rugby. But actually, I talked to Chloe about rugby. She doesn't care.
No.
She cares if I've done all right. She doesn't care about Bristol. She doesn't care about England, really. It's just another sport that silly little boys play, probably.
I think if Worcester go down, which is looking very likely, and therefore will have to, be, reinstated in the league somewhere. They'll probably not drop down to level 5, but they might drop down to level 3 or 4. And then you've got an issue with where do you go with that? Leeds, it happened to Leeds a couple of years ago, and that's they've not bounced back yet.
Happened to Welsh as well. I know they weren't at that top level when they died, but London Welsh just had to start from the very bottom.
Exactly. They're playing the same tier as us at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
Level 5. And then Wasps go. If you lose 2 of these Premiership clubs in quick succession, there was a thing, and I couldn't find it again, but only one club had been in positive cash flow, which probably means nothing to anyone else. Theo like it in the last 3 years or something, but
yeah,
it's just it's not sustainable, and everyone will end up going the same way. Saris are so well funded and pulling loads of money from each and every direction, rugby, extracurricular, coaching. You do a really good job. But if they've got no one to play against,
it doesn't matter.
Why would you want to fund a club that wins every year if they've got nothing to beat?
I do wonder if there will be. We'll scrap the Heineken, not the Heineken Cup, whatever it's called now, but we'll then have the rich clubs from it. I mean, the French are doing fine, but there's going to have to be a point where Saris, probably Tigers now, they're probably getting a little bit of funding. Bristol, probably Exeter as well, they're probably the cash cows. Maybe Sale, but they're going to have to go off and just shoot off and do something else.
Like a European league, I think.
Yeah, it's going to have to be a European league. Otherwise, because if you're losing Worcester, you're losing what? I mean, like I said, Worcester aren't a team that people really care about outside of rugby, but people know who Wasps are because there's a fair few of the World Cup winning team that played for Wasps, and they're quite a staple rugby team in the Prem. People know who they are. If you lose them, I think that shows a massive drop in what actually we think rugby is. And I mean, people will probably blame the fact that they've moved location as well, not blame it, but it has a part to play. But I would be shocked if we don't see this over the next few years for another few clubs.
Oh yeah, I mean, you only have to think Gloucester, Bath, Bath especially. One of those teams that it could just all fall apart. I know they've got a great following, but they haven't got much in terms of asset built around them and stuff like that. It's a real worry, and the RFU certainly aren't making as much money as they used to. No. Don't quite understand why. Something probably worth looking into, but even the board members aren't paying themselves as much in the last few years. So, that's an interesting one. I think rugby's really struggling. If you just look on sort of the rugby union page on on the BBC. You've got you've got Worcester Warriors face Exodus, so unpaid players. Fair enough, of course. You've got someone being banned, Aki being banned for 8 weeks.
Oh, yeah, again, Bundy Aki's always getting banned. Loves a high shot.
You've got Cuthbert is doubtful for Wales. 3 former Irish players filing claims against the IRFU because they got concussion or some head injury. And the last one's the Australian scrum half taking a dive. So this one,
is that the one where he knocked himself out?
Sorry,
is that the one where he knocked himself out?
No, the one where he got punched in the face.
Oh, right, Fairy Boy. No, yeah. Watch the video. Off topic. Watch a video of someone going to try and knocking themselves out with a swan dive.
Oh God. So yeah, the sport just seems to be marred in negativity at the moment.
Yeah.
Whereas at the lower levels, Saturday for us was fantastic. Even though Alnwick lost, I think they enjoyed the game. And there's less money flying around in level 5 this year. It looks like.
Yeah.
But without level 1 and 2, there isn't a level 5. So.
No, and I think even level 2 though, with the champ, I know we've had Poulet on and we've spoken with Ben and people like that. That I don't know what the weather's doing now in Notts. It's probably still slightly damp, but Friday night under the lights at Notts is Notts Donny today, so that's a crowd draw for the championship. And I imagine if it has remained slightly dry, the atmosphere would be buzzing down there tonight.
Yeah,
it's Friday night, but watching Newcastle Bristol on the TV, 2 teams which have credible internationals, it felt like there was about 50, 60 people. I actually watched it and I thought, this feels like watching a rugby game on TV during COVID when there were no fans. It's just like there's just no draw. I think people can't afford it. I think the draw's gone. You don't want to can't bother to go and sit out on a Friday night in the cold. It's on TV. Might as well stay in and watch it on TV.
Yeah. So this is why we'll be covering mainly level 5 and below on this podcast. Or level 4 and below, because
level 4. We'll give them a shout. And unless there's any top level guests, we'll have them on. Any guests from level 9 though, so don't worry about that, people. You'll know most of the people we'll talk to. But I think it is important to talk about the state of teams like Worcester and Wasps, because actually it might only be grassroots which is somewhat successful over the next kind of decade and a half, 2 decades, because everyone's going to have to end up playing back down there at some point, aren't they?
Yeah, it looks like it. It's a strange one, hopefully for the good of the people who won't be able to disappear off to a new club and find a new contract. All those people that work at Worcester and Wasps will secure themselves jobs in something that they can do and in this difficult time.
And well, as you can kind of tell throughout that episode, the Wi-Fi was a little bit dodgy. And at that point, after discussing Worcester Warriors, it all went to pot. So there was no more of that episode, so I do apologise. But I hope the discussion was informing. I hope Phil might have answered some of the money questions. I might have added some banter for you. But next week we will be back and properly firing, trying to release on a Friday. The Wi-Fi and then the games yesterday caused it to be a bit delayed. So we're happy it's out now. Keep an eye out because we've got some big plans for the live pod. The live pod is definitely happening this year. We are currently in talks with a few venues, and then we'll be trying to get some big names down on the pod as well. So remember, share this around your clubs. I'm hoping the discussions about the scores will go down well. So yeah, let your clubmen know, your players, your fans, that there is a Midlands Rugby podcast. Let us know if there's anything we need to shout out as well from your club. So just drop us a message on Instagram at the Midlands Rugby Pod, or on Facebook at the same handle, or if you follow one on myself or Phil, drop us a message. Anyway, speak to you next week.